This was the train heading north. I'd made my way south bit by bit over several days, but was now making up the distance back in one go. And from a rainy start in Reggio Calabria, the weather improved markedly over the hour, and soon the blue skies had returned. It was also giving me plenty of reading time, something I'm not usually afforded. This is by the same guy who wrote the excellent History of Venice. It was timely too. I found myself reading on the loss of Byzantine control in southern Italy in the 1000s, and I hadn't realised that this had been a contributing nudge in the East-West schism. And the train passed over the mouth of the Fiume Noce, and we were no longer in Calabria. I'd crossed into the region on the evening of my third day, and now I was leaving it on the morning of the 7th. And after all those years looking at Calabria and plotting when I'd get to see it, this had been a triumph. It had been a great time, but I also felt like I'd managed to get in a good selection of things, both on the east and west coasts, places close to transport links, but also more remote. And yeah, in just under 100 hours, quite a large quantity of Calabria. Drunk enough espresso to blind a horse. Hashtag, please don't give espresso to horses, it's just not necessary. So we're back, and this episode is part 4 to our journey this far, and title drop. So we are Forest Archaic Collective, and as well as making jungle drum and bass, we've followed ancient sites across Europe and beyond, whether it's Neolithic standing stones, Roman arches or Romanesque churches. We are proudly and resolutely AI-free. We've always believed that if you're going to share these stories about ancient places, we need to go and film them for ourselves, not just spam a stock library, definitely not getting the data centers to slop out some half-plausible looking garbage. Actually go and see these things for ourselves to show you. So please support us in doing that. More on how at the end of the video and in the description. We shall be getting to Naples and the area surrounding shortly, so don't fret. The Campania coast sparkled and shone. A small credit to the train. By the time we got into Salerno, even though we'd left 45 minutes late, we'd made up the time. We were only running about 8 minutes late by the time we got there. So stepped off in Salerno, and having multiple times been unable to get a decent look at the place, I was determined to actually get some quality time here. First thing, after an espresso, of course, was actually going to the waterfront. Not a great swim spot, let's say, but definitely a nice view. Next, up the hill slightly, and something you definitely don't see every day, this is an aqueduct into Salerno. It's medieval. This is actually really annoying. There are umpteen websites all copying each other's homework saying this is from the 800s. That is extremely unlikely. Certainly the masonry you are seeing in its current form, not least because Gothic arches wouldn't be popularised around Europe for another 300 years. I am, however, struggling at short notice to find a more reliable dating citation. We are not always highly confident on these, so yeah, not sure for now. But it's a pretty remarkable place. You can see it's all been sort of wrapped, almost as if it's been attacked by a legion of tropical spiders, but still well worth a look. A bit of a hidden Easter egg. Most of central Salerno, the buildings look pretty modern. No huge shock. But if you sneak down a back street or two, there are these little details fossilised from the older city, including these arches. They're not the easiest to catch. They're a bit high up and not in the greatest light, but these gorgeous courses of stone are a leftover from the Castel Terracena, originally built by Robert Guiscard. And for a point of comparison, through a few more pretty back streets and time to see the cathedral. Now, there's some very beautiful Normanno-Byzantine work here, with a selection of Roman sarcophagi rigging the edge of the cloisters. It's all good stuff. Paired with the Romanesque loveliness of the bell tower. This was a real treat. The inside is Baroque, but it appears to have absorbed the bones of its original Norman form. It contains a crypt, which apparently these are the bones of St. Matthew. And I'm just going to bite my tongue rather than giving you a full Bible study from Acts 14 about how anyone from the New Testament would be horrified if you were worshipping their bones, but it's what it is. Well, theological issues aside, time to head out of Salerno, and having finally seen the place properly, I was feeling pretty good about it. Didn't get to the castle, which is a lot higher up. That's going to have to be something for a return journey. So boarding the train at Salerno, waiting the 70 minutes to the next stop, all the while busting for a piss, as the singular bathroom on the train was inoperative. I was also feeling much the same exhaustion I'd had the previous afternoon. The coastal views that were flashing by were exquisite, but once again, I could just feel I was enjoying myself less than I really ought, especially considering my beautiful surroundings. Well, trooped off the train and walked to my next stop. I don't think this is going to be much of a shock. I was filling in Herculaneum. My very first draft had me visiting this on the first day and then Pompeii on the penultimate. Given my energy levels, and I'm kind of fortunate I did this in reverse, not least because I wanted to be into Pompeii at the earliest possible hour. So, true past Herculaneum, it's somewhat sunken below the current ground level, in fact by a level of about 4 to 5 stories. This means from the perimeter fence you're actually afforded great views. In fact, since wide shots really are the goal, I dare suggest these are some of the best shots of Herculaneum. So it was exciting to catch all these from above, and having banked maybe 20 minutes of footage, I paused. My rotation was leading me towards the entrance, but I was just, again, feeling this real lack of enthusiasm to actually take the plunge, pay the €16 and get all the details of the site. I'd be concentrating very hard for sort of over an hour, catching all the things. And from behind me, I could feel this swell of anger emanating from the Greek chorus that is the less charitable end of my comment section. But I'd managed to get pretty good coverage of it, and feeling very naughty, I decided that no. Coming off the back of 7 very intense days, I would actually be kind to myself and permit myself to clock off a little bit earlier and not head into the site. I always do these trips with the view that I will be back. There is virtually nowhere where I go, catch absolutely everything I want to, and then pat my hands like, right, never have to come back here ever again. So this is with the understanding that Herculaneum is a pretty easy train ride from Naples, and I absolutely will be able to catch this on my next time through, or maybe even the time after that. All of this is going on to an increasingly large pile of Roman sites and other ancient places we've been exploring. At the time of recording, we just got back from zigzagging through the Benelux countries, plus a large slice of Western Germany. That might not be where you'd expect to catch the Romans, and you'd be dead wrong. Granted, some of the absolute highlights of the trip were recreated sites, which you should know by now we love to film. But this is still based on local archaeology in the ground, as well as temples and Roman forts and villas. In fact, let's just take stock a moment. We have been doing this a while now, and we might have shown you our map of Europe, which is not for the weak of stomach. But as far as catching the Romans across Europe and beyond, this is going to take a deep breath. So the UK first. England, kind of goes without saying, but some of the absolute best are actually over in Wales, such as Caerwent and Caerleon. And then going into Scotland, again, you might be shocked just how much there is extant around, for example, Glasgow. There is going to be an episode sometime soon about our exploration around the Antonine Wall. Into France, we've caught some in the middle, kind of around Limoges and thereabouts. We are overdue getting around more to the north, and while we've got some great stuff in the south so far, there is far, far more to do around the cities in the southwest. Spain, we've caught the middle. We've got a lot in Andalusia and kind of around there. Merida was a massive highlight. The very next episode is going to be about us heading up to Burgos and seeing the north of Spain, and that's got all sorts of Roman stuff up there too. Doubling back a moment to Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium and Luxembourg. We just mentioned all of those. And you may be surprised just how much good Roman stuff there is to see in Switzerland. You can just scroll a little way back on the channel to see those episodes, and even a villa site in Liechtenstein. Austria's a gap for us so far, but we did catch some stuff in Ljubljana, in Slovenia, in Croatia, tons from Pula to Split. There's loads down into Montenegro. The ruins are slightly lower, but particularly Dioclea near the capital, that was great. And again, this is all recent stuff on the channel, both Montenegro and Albania, a bunch of gorgeous archaeological parks there. We've caught some Roman stuff in North Macedonia around Ohrid, most of the Roman layers to see in Sofia in Bulgaria, surprising no one. A very large number of Roman and more ancient sites around Greece, everywhere from Macedonia in the north to the Cyclades in the south. Turkey, perhaps the single greatest concentration of frankly unbelievable Roman and Hellenic ruins. And getting back a while on the channel now, we also caught a lot of the Roman stuff around Jordan. North Africa, admittedly, is more of a gap for us, some of it much harder to visit than others, but circling back through Malta, and then, yes, still working through a great many Roman bits and pieces through Italy, everything from Palermo to Aquileia. And I'm sure so Hungary caught some of the stuff around Aquincum, and Cyprus, I should mention, yes, a lot of great stuff there. So that is just a snapshot of the Roman stuff we've caught, and all of which is a big work in progress with a lot more to get to, and it's all going towards these huge history series that we are compiling. We get a chance to go a lot more into the historical details of all of these. But much like the rest of the UK, as I'm recording this at the back end of August, this year the platform has decided to hand us a big drought. It's decided that the thousands of people who've shown an interest in our stuff and the 20 odd hours we have to burn through per episode on a rolling 7-day basis means nothing. and they very noticeably turn off the taps before we've reached the numbers you'd expect of a small primary school. And the inference is always, well, that's your fault for not making your thumbnails dumber and not making your titles wildly more disingenuous. And what can you do about this? It basically just makes all of our work just tokens in a large unlicensed casino in which the platform decides if it's feeling generous this week. And look, there are some of you here who make the effort to catch what we do, and I hugely appreciate that, but we're not really in a position to arm wrestle the largest tech company on Earth. So all we can ask, to actually help us to get to these series. We're going to be launching a huge history series on the Normans in the new year. There's a massive amount to show you there, as well as getting back on the Hillfort Trail this autumn. If you could hit the bell, that's what's going to make all the difference, because you're actually going to get notified when we release episodes, so you might actually get a chance to see what we're doing. And huge thanks to everyone who's done that already and kind of helped us grow. It's been very discouraging being stuck in this artificially created slump, but there we are. Anyway, back to this trip. Saw a bit more of Ercolano, including this puzzling scaffolding Gene Wall, whose backstory I'm not really aware of, but yeah. So turning back to the train station, quick espresso. If we can just momentarily acknowledge the extremely poor design that puts this pedestrian crossing, the only crossing of the tracks, dead in the middle of where the train stops. An exceedingly poor choice for a stop that gets pretty high footfall. Anyway, felt good to get a pretty good look at Herculaneum, and heading back, it was time for see Naples and die. Like all visitors, I was hoping to accomplish the former whilst avoiding the latter. And, despite its rep for being a little rough, I figured there had to be an upper limit on just how bad it could be in reality. I mean, I recall talking to other hostel goers in years past when I was visiting Sicily, and most of them had plans to stay in Naples for a night or more, and I'm sure that not every visitor was planning on approaching their visit like a level on Streets of Rage. So I had to assume that keeping my possessions somewhat close to my person, I was probably going to be reasonably fine. And got out and yeah, much per my initial glimpse on day one, pretty hectic in the main open square by the station. Headed to the hostel, and you know what? After a few misses with hostels and people to hang out with in the week, had just an incredible evening. Met a bunch of people, particularly conversing with a Canadian guy, just talking about everything from history and how towns are run to church cultures. It's just another case of my conviction that hostels are some of the best places on earth for the way you can just link up with strangers and they inevitably turn out to be brilliant people. The hostel was also pretty nice. Not immaculate, but definitely well put together. So I headed out early in the morning. I had a couple of hours before my flight. I didn't want to just pop in the station, sleep, and then fly out again. So out on the street, it was pretty busy, but on my final morning, I found myself full of energy. So, quick espresso, headed down the main street towards the Castle Nuovo, somewhat hemmed in by scaffolding, and there were just enough gaps to capture the ancient layers at the base. Kept on round to aim for the water and the Castel del Ovo. And again, scaffolding, not doing it any favours. In fairness, it's mostly in the form of an artillery fortress now, despite its earlier foundation. Carried on round, I'm almost certainly going to get shouted at for saying this, but I was struck how generally unhistoric the city felt. I'd looped out to the castles, which the parts that you can see now are not considerably ancient. I mean, like, for example, this square is, kind of nice, but, pardon me if I don't lapse into an ecstatic seizure. It's just, it's pretty good. The city was bombed quite heavily during World War II, so that's part of it. Since arriving back and doing some reading up, I did eventually find more of the Roman traces. There's a few subterranean bits, fragments of a theatre, traces of some very old churches, so that explains some of it. Again, it's going to need a revisit. With everything I'd keyed into my week, Naples had not been the most major target, so I hit some points and there's some more to see on another trip. Anyway, so final espresso, and it was time to... No, hang on. Wait, seriously? Yes, so my flight was not leaving in 2 hours' time, but approximately 9. Well, ain't that something? The funniest thing, and this often happens on these trips, I was so buzzed about how the whole trip had gone and southern Italy, I was already thinking about the next time and let's go again. And then circumstances were like, oh, well, go on then, have 7 more hours. And it caught me completely flat-footed. Rather than feeling excited, I'd already sort of mentally checked out and was kind of looking forward to seeing my family. So all of a sudden, I had to get my head screwed back on again. if I end up going with the title thumbnail combo, I think I am, I may have told a small fib for brevity. This was a delay rather than a cancellation, but you get past a certain time, the two essentially end up meaning the same. This is something that has become far more common post-pandemic, to the point I get a little pit of my stomach trauma spike every time EasyJet sends me a push notification, because not infrequently it's, hey, we've cancelled your flight. Lol. A quick retrospective. So we've got Pula in 2022, like an amazing trip. Also incorporating Friuli in North Italy. Definitely recommend that episode. That delayed the flight till 4 a.m. in the morning, meaning a rather uncomfortable night napping on the terminal floor. Venice, was that also 2022 or was it 2023? I got the notification about 5:30 in the morning that, ooh, no flights for you. But luckily I'm an early riser, so I managed to nab us some Verona flights for the evening, though those themselves also got delayed. It gave us some time in Padua and a bit more time in Verona. Dubrovnik 2024, that was an all-timer, the saga of which is at the opening of the Mykonos episode, as that's where I was supposed to be connecting with my entire family, and connections from the Dalmatian coast to the Aegean Islands are much harder than the distance as the crow flies would imply. Suffice to say, this keeps happening. Well, okay, even though I'd not done my due diligence with Herculaneum the day previous, I just wasn't feeling like retracing those steps. And it was now mid-morning, so the site would be at its most crowded. I soon resolved to, in fact, head in the opposite direction. I had entirely been on a southeastern heading out of Naples this whole trip, but now I had the chance to see some bits, still kind of within the Naples metro area, but a little further out to the west. So first, I needed to link into a completely different metro system, and for that, a bit of a hoof across the town. The town's obsession with, I had to look this up, Maradona is, it's whatever. So I did catch a bit more of the city in the tight streets packed with vendors, quick espresso, and drumroll, it's no toilet seat. There you go. Another one for the gallery. And still no idea why this is such a thing in southern Italy. Then metro train out of Monte Santo, and after about 45 minutes getting off at the small station called Lucrino, and okay, that has to be some sort of record for a metro station that can get you onto the beach the fastest. You're barely 10 paces off the train and you are walking on the sand. Beautiful spot too. Not my actual target. That needed a near hour walk more. That might seem silly, but the other station was about as far to the other side. I didn't mind. This was of course bonus time. And eventually we were in Baiae. Now, this might need a little unpacking. The Roman town of Baiae was known as kind of something of an Ibiza. It had a rep, especially as a place where young people would go and party and get up to shenanigans on the coast. Its remains are pretty impressive in scale. There's this honking great chunk of a dome that was once the Temple of Diana, and then into the main kind of archaeological site there is a lot going on. You're mainly looking at a series of bath complexes and terraces. It's not preserved to a Pompeii or Herculaneum level, but that hardly seems a fair bar to set. And there's still ghostly traces of figures surviving in frescoes and a couple of mosaic bits. Just an impressive place, all things considered. There were only 2 other people with me in the entire site. And looping out, there's also this massive octagon, which is the surviving portion of the Temple of Venus. The town of Baiae was kind of curious. It partly looked like it was waiting for a summer tourist season, but there was also a lot that looked like it was shuttered for good. Walking back, this is probably not the thing you're supposed to do. I was now undertaking a close to 2-hour route, again because the metro stations didn't link well with my objectives. But frankly, sure, why not? And at length, the next 2, now this one I'd only just noticed while planning the afternoon's route, but it is vast. We're now in an area called Pozzuoli, and this is the Mausoleum and Temple of Serapis, and yeah, it just keeps going. The fact that there's still these incredible sites just outside of Naples, and most people haven't heard of these, but yeah, not to be outdone, and it's kind of nuts. This may well be one of the most impressive things in the whole of the Naples area this side of Vesuvius. It's this whacking great amphitheatre that's not in bad shape considering. Pozzuoli is an otherwise quite unremarkable spot. It is wild that these 2 gigantic sites are just out in the open. The amphitheatre was not open on the day, so I couldn't poke my head in properly, but yeah, this is hugely underrated. I'd really recommend making a detour to catch these. There aren't many amphitheatres in this shape still standing. At this stage, I discovered another different metro station that would in fact link me back to Naples Garibaldi, which was welcome as I was pretty exhausted by this point. I was actually barely filming anymore. The 6 odd hours I put in on foot today were starting to take their revenge. Thankfully, it was about time to head to the airport, and happy to say, other than, taking off, 8 hours later than it was supposed to, the flight back pretty much went off without a hitch. I was afforded some very lovely parting shots of Naples from above, and just, one of those gorgeous high-altitude dusks, drenched in colour that seemed to stretch on for an eternity. So, it's taken 4 episodes, but that was the Italy trip, catching a tremendous amount from South Italy, my first time being there. We still have the game to catch up with from last time, so we were going with Norman castles, more in the direction of the UK, but not exclusively. So first of all, we've got Richmond in Yorkshire. Quite a few of you got this. Next, this is Snodhill Castle. Again, kind of ruined. It's one of the lesser known castles in the Welsh Marches, but yes, it's had some work done recently, and it's free. It's very much worth going to see. Next, this one, and I keep forgetting the name for this. This is Dromore. We caught this on our most recent trip to Ireland this year. It's just a little bit south of Belfast, and just an incredible example of the structure of a motte and bailey. And then for this recreated site, we're actually heading across the channel. This is just outside Angers in France. This is the Château à Motte de Verrières en Anjou. As ever, I can't help but overpronounce all of my French. And finally, a place where you don't normally expect to see the Normans. This is in Ioannina in the north of Greece, and this is the Tower of Bohemond. So, well done to everyone who got some of those. That was a little harder this week, so since we've been talking about amphitheatres, why not? Let's have a crack at a few of those. And if you're watching this episode carefully, we've actually given you a head start on some of these. Plus, a lot are just famous in their own right. So, number 1, this is pretty well known. I think most of you will probably get this. Number 2, maybe not as many, but it has been in a recent episode if you've been following our stuff. Then likewise, now this was not an episode that did well, but fairly recently we have mentioned this, so see if you can identify this one. Just a reminder, an amphitheatre is distinct for being a full ring as opposed to a theatre, which are semicircular. In common parlance, people often see a Roman or Greek theatre and say, hey, look at that amphitheatre, but that's not what they are. Number 4, this one is not in quite as good condition, but to give you a major clue, it's next to this much better preserved, or rather restored, theatre. And lastly, number 5, had to throw in one from the UK, and again, not in the greatest shape, but what you going to do? So post in the comments if you think you can get these. Try and do it without scrolling down the comments first, though, inevitably you can help each other out on some of the harder ones. If you've been enjoying the music in the background, it's ours. We make all the music for these episodes, and you can catch it all on bandcamp.com. If you want to support the channel, that's the place to do it. Also, kind of as ever, we're catching up on a bit of a backlog here. This was filmed last year, so if you want to see what we're doing on more of a week-by-week basis, follow us on Blue Sky, and then you can kind of see what we're up to currently. And yes, please hit the notification bell to actually be in with a chance of seeing our stuff again. Otherwise, we'll catch you very soon.